Mega Man Legends. When you hear that song, it just inspires nostalgia in you, doesn't it? And if it doesn't, well, you're a psychopath. Mega Man Legends isn't just a game, though. It's a whole aesthetic. Everyone in the low poly community can't shut the fuck up about it. And there's a reason why. It's because it's dope. It's timeless. It looks great. And honestly, modern games look like shit compared to it. They made this stuff back in 1997. I see uglier shit coming out all the time today. So today we're diving into how they pulled it off, and more importantly, how you can steal those techniques for your own profit. You know, after they decided to tank Mega Man Legends 3 and then blame it on the fans. But hey, I don't want to get sued, so let's move on. Mega Man Legends comes in two flavors, 1 and 2. The first Mega Man Legends game comes from the early PlayStation era. All of the character animations relied on rigid body segmentation. This means that characters were built from separate parts: upper arm, lower arm, head, neck, torso, all separate and each weighted to a single joint. This was called rigid skinning. It avoided vertex blending entirely, and it resulted in more of an action figure style look when characters were animated. By the time Mega Man Legends 2 came out, Capcom had pushed the technology so much harder, and we started to see primitive versions of soft skinning techniques. This is where vertices were influenced by more than one joint. Well, not necessarily. They were still rigid skinned, but they had polygons connecting between the joints, and this created a more natural looking bend in things like the elbows, the knees, and even the waist. If you look at the intro to Mega Man Legends 2, you can see it everywhere if you pay attention. I think that Mega Man Legends 2 looks better, but there's a charm about Mega Man Legends 1 that I think should be explored, and that's what this video is about. When you dig into the hardware specs of the PlayStation, you can find out that 360,000 flat triangles could be rendered every second, 180,000 could be texture mapped, and 90,000 could be texture mapped with lighting and Garode shading. Look, it's French, I don't know how to say it, give me a break. For the eagle-eyed math enjoyer in here, you'll realize that video games run faster than 1 frame a second. Well, except for maybe some modern games. Which means those optimistic numbers of 360,000 flat shaded triangles doesn't actually exist in the real world. Back on planet Earth, you have to take each one of those numbers based on your technical specs and divide it by the number of frames you want every second. In our case, we actually have to take the 180,000 and divide it by 30. This means you'd need to have a limit of 6,000 triangles on screen maximum if you wanted to hit 30 frames a second. Now I know you nerds are out there crunching some numbers, and you think to yourself, well, now all I need to know is how many polygons it takes to render one character, and that's how many characters I can get on the screen. Wrong. You actually have to consider your environment as well, but it doesn't just stop there. There's also particle effects. Those are also triangles rendered to the screen. Numerous things are going to add up over the course of the development, and suddenly you're going to realize you didn't quite have the budget you thought you did. Here are some of the interesting findings when I looked at the models. The roll model for in-game is 350 triangles. The Tron model for in-game is 343 triangles. The cinematic version of roll is 474, while the cinematic version of Tron is much lower at 405. Referencing a random NPC, the homework girl is 237. Interesting note about the homework girl and other NPCs, many of them don't actually have arm joints. Most of them have solid arms and solid legs. They then had one singular joint that drove the entire arm to keep it extra simple. This probably reduced on CPU cost for animations, among other things. While we have these NPCs on screen, let's take a look at them really fast. The cameraman has the entire camera modeled into his body. The junk shop woman is actually incredibly low poly, coming in at 188 triangles. But do note that her arms and legs are solid, and the bottom of her dress is non-existent. It's been polygon culled. The cameraman does have a movable elbow joint on one arm, and the vegetable shop guy actually has movable arms and legs, although I don't remember much of him. I also want to address some of the techniques used to overcome not having soft skinning at this point in development. Since they were just overlapping meshes, one technique that they used was to actually make the meshes conform to each other very tightly. Take a look at Roll's pants. Theoretically, you should model these as one solid object and then soft deform the areas around the thighs. But they didn't do that. They actually modeled it in 3 different parts, and then moved those parts independently. This actually creates a really good look with really simple skinning and really effective animation. I actually think it still looks really good today. This could be produced in a very short time by any number of artists, and an animator doesn't have to worry about making sure everything looks perfect. They can be free to just make animations. One thing you'll notice in Mega Man Legends is that when you watch the characters in the animations, they're fun. They don't worry too much about whether or not it's going to clip. They just do whatever they want to do. I've never been a big graphics guy, and I've never really understood why graphics were so important to some people. I actually like the ability to use my imagination here. I can look past the clipping and intersecting geometry. To me, it's charming and fun and colorful. Something about it is just missing in modern games. The texture maps for the game are going to be 256 by 256 maximum. Most of the NPCs use something smaller or a variation of it. You can actually shorten sides on textures using a 256 by 128. This happens a lot in the case of NPCs, but most of the main characters are using a 256 by 256. Keep that in mind when you're making your characters. The process of modeling in the Mega Man Legends style isn't very difficult. It's a matter of making cubes look like a person. So in my case, I kept Roll and Tron in the scene at the same time while modeling. I wanted to make sure that my character looked like she belonged in the same world. For anything I was unsure about the shape or scale of, I would take the cube and move it either directly over Roll or Tron, or I would move it directly next to and then edit and scale as needed. For example, when shaping my character's arms, I actually moved my cube directly over Roll's arms. I wanted to make sure that my arm length and proportions were as close as possible. When modeling my character's legs, I wanted to make sure that the legs were as close to Tron's legs as possible. Instead of overlapping the shape, I simply moved my cube right next to Tron's legs and started modeling out what I saw. This helped me pay attention to the decision-making that they were making, and I was able to start making my own decisions, learning from them. When I started making the head, I made a cube and moved it next to Tron's head. Tron has the closest head shape to a basic head shape, so I wanted to learn from that. I took my cube and I started reshaping it based on what I saw on Tron's face. For example, the vertex positions and the edge loops. Once I got as much information from that as I could, I then moved the head back over onto my character and started editing it further from there, using information I could glean from other models on the model's resource or Tron and Roll. In my case, I had to make up a few things because I couldn't quite find what I was looking for in any of the example models on the website. So I just got creative with what I had learned while I followed the directions that they had laid out for me with the other models. Ultimately, this process didn't take too long and wasn't too terribly difficult. From there, it was on to the UVs and the texturing, which actually turned out to be more closely related than I thought. I was actually kind of surprised how well making the UVs and the texture map at the exact same time worked. I'm pretty accustomed to laying out the UVs first and then texturing on top of it, but I realized that I needed a lot more control over the UVs and the layout than I initially thought. So what I did was I laid out the UVs on top of Roll's texture just to get an idea for some of the more complicated sections like the face and the hands. Once I got those sections laid out and I understood what technique they were using, that's when I moved into my own textures. The way I did it was I created a base 256 by 256 texture, and then I laid out the base skin tone. From there, I would project the texture of each section and color block them. After I color blocked them, I added shadow colors, and then I would separate the UVs so that I could isolate the shadows. One thing you need to know about the Mega Man Legends style is that the characters are always lit from the front and they're always lit from above. This means that there's lighting in the front and shadows in the back. If you look at the back faces of any character, in other words, all the faces that are not facing in the forward-facing direction of the character, they're all the dark shade tones of the character. The back of their arm, the back of their back, the back of their head, the back of their legs, the back of the shoes. It's actually a really clever way to separate the front and the back with a lighting technique. This is a really important tip. You don't want to have any stretching or skewing in the UVs related to your eyes and your mouth. The last thing you want to do is lay out a great looking texture for the eyes and then find out it's skewed when you look at it on the face. Pay extra close attention to making sure that there's no distortion and there's no warping, and it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of struggle. After all, the face on these characters is one of the most important features, so don't fuck it up. One tip I'll give you about the facial expressions is that they need to be bold and readable. If you're rendering at true resolution or something similar to a reduced resolution, you won't have the same fidelity that you get on your default monitor today. So that means line work style facial expressions just don't work. Stick with big, bold, colorful, blocked-in eyes and mouths for the best result. I tried to experiment a little, and I found, in the end, that rendering at resolution, over half of my faces didn't read the way I wanted them to. When it came to animating the eyes and mouth on the face, it was a simple shader setup. However, I did find there was a weird math quirk. In Mega Man Legends, the expressions are 51 pixels wide, but they're separated by a 1 pixel black divider. This means that when you add the 51 pixels up over 5 times, you end up with 1 extra pixel on the right-hand side of the texture. This means that it's not going to wrap properly because it's not evenly divided by 5. It can't be. So here's what you want to do. To figure out how far to move the texture every time you want to slide the index of the expression, you need to take 51 pixels divided by 256. This gives you the exact amount to move horizontally. Now remember, we're still missing that 1 pixel. So every time you row wrap, you want to add 1 divided by 256 to make up for the missing pixel. This leaves your UVs rock solid every time you move them, and any indice you pick from top to bottom will show up perfect. The math can easily be applied when you row wrap using the same logic as before. If you take the height of the expression and divide it by the height of the texture, that's the exact amount you want to move every time. Finally, we get to the rigging. Now, I'm not much of a rigger myself, but I do understand that it has its purposes, and I've done my work here and there. For this project, I used Rigify. The only thing I learned about Rigify in relation to this project is that I actually think Rigify is a little too advanced for this style. It adds a lot of extra bone twisting and other features that don't really help when you're animating in this extremely low poly style. So I would actually recommend that for future projects, if anyone wants to do this, that they choose a system that's way more simple. Perhaps even building your own rigs would be a lot easier. It's definitely something I'm going to be looking into, and I'll post an update video when I learn more and come up with a better solution. So there you have it. All in all, this project took about 3 days, and it really opened my eyes. As someone who comes from the game industry and has spent most of their time making higher poly, way more complex characters, I actually found this to be way more rewarding. I just enjoyed the process. Though there was some technical hurdles that I don't like, for example rigging, the process was so simple it actually made it really bearable. Instead of a character taking weeks upon weeks to create, it took about 3 days. Then I passed it off to Mrs. Merck, who's a well-established animator, and she cooked up a few animations for us. I could easily put this character into a game. My takeaways from this is indie devs should be using styles like this. There's a reason that so many great games were coming out so quickly back in the day. It's because developers didn't constrain themselves to overly complex art techniques. So much of game development today is dedicated to highly complicated art tech, but that doesn't make a game better. I still think Mega Man Legends is a better game than most games released today, and I hope this helps you create the kind of game you want to make without getting hung up on the art. Making something like this doesn't make your game any less awesome, but it does give you more freedom to make exactly what you want. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'd like to give a special shout out to my sponsor for the stream, Twitch Chat. They supported and donated in order to see this event run, and I created this entire character live on stream with everyone asking questions and participating. If you want, you can join me on stream. You'll find the Twitch link in the about description below. If you'd like to be a part of it, feel free to check out the stream sometime, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.